Hello and welcome to episode 291 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. This is a bonus episode. We got a bunch of stuff in the mailbag. We've got an excuse of the week. We've got a pearls versus turds. I'm not sure exactly when this is going to air, but probably sometime during the week of March 29th. Upcoming events include the April LSAT starting on April 10th. The June registration deadline is Friday, April 30th, and that's for an LSAT that's going to happen during the week of June 12th. I'm ready to just dive right into this pearls versus turds. Ben, why don't you tackle it?
Sure. So pearls versus turds is where we take some advice, usually from the internet, and decide whether it's actually good advice, a pearl, or bad advice, a turd. Or I guess we use explicit language, right, on this show to be very clear. So shitty advice.
Yeah. And there's a lot of shitty advice out there, man. The scoreboard right now is 13 pearls against 43 turds. And 22 ties, which are basically turds anyway. So
yeah,
this one's coming to us from listener Jacob. What's Jacob have to say?
Hello, Ben and Nathan. A career advisor at the university I'm attending is advising prospective law students to take the LSAT backwards. Okay. Just don't listen to anything else this person has to say.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. This idea comes up a lot for new test takers. I think they're like, oh, if I could get the hard stuff out of the way, which might be a great philosophy for your life, like during the day, maybe you should tackle your hardest tasks first, but it's horrible advice for the LSAT. He goes on to say, according to her, most students do not finish each section because they run out of time while tackling the harder questions. Her advice is to start every section with the last question passage game and then work toward the first question. Her reasoning is that fewer students run out of time when they're able to get the hard questions done first. Wrong. Okay, her premise is wrong. So
just pure trash. I mean, that's terrible advice. And I put this on the agenda, up top here because I'm sorry, but your career advisor does not know shit about the law school admission test. That is just absolute trash, completely opposite of what we would ever recommend. The questions appear in each section roughly in increasing order of difficulty, and you need to make sure you harvest the low-hanging fruit first. Your career advisor is advising you to go to the very top of the tree and risk breaking your neck to try to get the hardest questions on the section first. So you just immediately exhaust yourself. You immediately get frustrated, panicky, banging your head against these hardest questions that you're ever going to see. And, on a logic game or something, you might spend the entire 35 minutes working on that one game. You go game 4 and game 3, you very likely might spend 35 minutes on game 4 and game 3, depending on your level. Now, if you're an expert who's already scoring 175 on every test, I suppose you could get away with this.
Sure. And I love your analogy, by the way. You go to the top of the tree, right? You try to get those not low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And then you think to yourself, but the low-hanging fruit's just down there. I can easily grab it. But remember, someone is going to come in and whisk you away from this vineyard, right? They're going to take you off and they're going to say, sorry, you can't take any more fruit out of this vineyard. And you're going to say, wait a sec, I see fruit right there. And they're going to say,
it's an orchard, not a vineyard. There's no high hanging fruit in a vineyard. It's all low to the ground.
Yeah, that was thanks for that. Wait, so I do see that on some level. So a vineyard would be like grapes, right?
Yes, which are all low.
Is that all that can be considered a vineyard?
Yes, it's an orchard.
Oh, come on, there's got to be something else. You're not a horticulturist.
But I did grow up in the country. And if somebody says vineyard, I've been to Napa before and Sonoma. And when you say vineyard, that shit's like chest high, probably.
Okay, I'm not conceding this. I believe a vineyard could have higher fruit. Let's hope it's true. But
right,
yes.
In Ben's weird orchard or Ben's weird vineyard, where he for some reason built 20-foot high arbors to grow his grapes on.
Yeah.
Proceed. Don't go to the top of that weird.
No.
Yeah.
And anyways, okay, I don't want to take it any further, but yeah, that's yeah. So that's your problem, is you're basically gonna be kicked out of this vineyard or orchard, and you're gonna see fruit you could have easily grabbed, and it's not gonna be yours.
Yeah. You want to read the rest of Jacob's email? Seems like he's got a pretty
Yeah.
good picture of this advice.
Oh, okay. I immediately thought of your podcast when I heard this advice. Sounds to me like a major turd. Her reasoning appears invalid as she is confusing correlation with causation. Okay. I don't see that right.
Maybe she's
Yeah,
certainly not understanding the cause of this phenomenon of most people running out of time,
sure.
right?
That
It's
is
like
true.
she's just like, well, most of the people run out of time on the hardest questions, therefore it's the hardest questions that cause you to run out of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that might be true, but that's not an argument in favor of doing those questions first, because in that case you would just run out of time
Yeah.
first, like right
You're gonna
away.
see you're gonna see greater problems with
Yeah.
time. I imagine the students finishing the sections would be doing so regardless of what question they start on. She also completely ignores the accuracy aspect of test taking. Finishing a section does not necessarily equal getting answer choices correct. I would like to know if you agree this is a turd, or if you would argue that this advice is to be a pearl. No, it's not a pearl. Thanks for everything you guys are doing. The podcast is great, and the demon has changed my LSAT prep immensely. Well, that's good to hear, Jacob. What did I want to say about this? Oh, yeah. So Jacob says the accuracy aspect of test taking, right? And you and Jackson just put together that tool, which I thought was interesting. If you look at some simple numbers, right? Some simple extremes, but if someone gets 100% correct of 70% of the test, right? They only do 70% of the test, but they get 100% of that correct. Well, obviously they're getting 70% correct plus whatever percentage, 20% of the remaining questions. So you're necessarily going to be above 70%. But if you flip that around and only get 70% correct of 100% of the test, well, now you're getting 70% correct. So you're always going to be lower, at least with those extreme numbers.
Yeah. And if you start at the beginning of the section and only do 70% of the questions, you're not even doing the hardest questions in the section.
Mm-hmm,
You're guessing on the hardest questions. You're not going to get very many of them right, but you are going to get 20% of them right on average.
Yeah.
And so you're going to get 20% of the hardest questions correct for free, while spending your entire 35 minutes on the first 70% of the questions in the section, which are easier. And so it's so much easier to do 70% of the questions with 100% accuracy than it is to do 100% of the questions with 70% accuracy.
Yeah.
And
because you have a harder batch.
Yeah, because you're doing more work on harder questions.
But Nathan, you could skip the hard ones and just go find
skip
the
the hard
ones.
ones is like just such a turd. That's one of the worst pieces of advice we ever hear. I mean, well, but see, the thing is, if you do the questions from the beginning, you will be automatically skipping the hard ones. Your career advisor's faulty assumption, it's a foundational assumption that she made at the very beginning. She thinks everybody has to finish every section. And that's why she came up with this dumb advice. I think it's dumb advice, even if you do decide that you're going to try to finish every section.
Yeah, I'd rather you rush on the ones that are hard.
I'd rather you rush on the hardest ones that you're going to miss anyway, or that you're more likely to miss anyway, than rush on the easy ones, which anybody could get if they just took their damn time with them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but your career advisor should not be giving any LSAT advice.
Hopefully,
if you have, go ahead.
Hopefully your career advisor's advice outside the LSAT is great, but
I'm going to go ahead and provisionally say she's not to be trusted because she's popping off about things she doesn't understand. If you have a pearls versus turd candidate, you can email help@thinkinglsat.com, or you can find us on social media @thinkinglsat. We'd love to get you on a future show. Ready for excuse of the week?
Yeah, except for I'm slightly uneasy by a claim you just made. You said that she's popping off on things that she doesn't
Which
know.
we do all the time. I'm glad you caught me on that.
Anyway,
Yeah, hey, but I think when we pop off about shit we definitely are not experts on, I think
Yeah.
we acknowledge it.
Okay. So there's an acknowledgement of the ignorance.
Well, how many times have we said, hey, this is just pure random speculation, but, and then we give a strong opinion, but
Yeah, this is
I
true.
know full well that I'm wrong half the time. I'm not wrong about the LSAT. You know, and so I can recognize just pure trash when I see it, and that is really, really, that's dangerous, damaging advice she's given out. I'm sure her heart's in the right place. She thinks she's helping, but she's
Yeah.
hurting all of those students that she's giving that advice to, and it's
Yep.
just a shame. Okay, excuse of the week. It says, hello, Ben and Nathan. I have an excuse of the week, and it's my own exclamation point. I've noticed that my ability to carefully process and understand each reading comp paragraph one at a time has been improving. But on today's drill question, I was still spending time debating answer choices on a question or two. When I went back later to review the debated questions, whether answered correctly or not, I realized that sometimes I check out mentally when reading the answer choices and miss key words that would allow me to eliminate them immediately. This is in italics, excuse myself from giving the answer choices the proper mental attention because I feel, again, italics, finished in accomplishing my goal to spend enough time processing the passage. So basically, checking out on the actual questions, which is where you get paid, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did such a good job reading the passage that I can now half ask the questions. No,
Has that client paid you yet? No, but I'm moving on to
I
the next
don't
job.
invoicing and I don't, whatever. It'll all work out. Um, Okay. I realize it sounds obvious to say, yes, you must be mentally engaged the entire time, but I didn't realize in the moment that I was checking out until I caught words on my review that did not register the first time around. I know it's dangerous to make an analogy, but it reminded me of a tennis player who works patiently to construct a point into a winning position only to dump the easy overhead into the net at the end. Many thanks to both of you for creating the demon and offering really useful advice for the LSAT and beyond, Chris.
I
What do you
love
think about
this.
that
I love this
excuse?
email. Well, first of all, I love this email because the issues that Chris is dealing with are the kinds of things that we want people to be dealing with, right? Not the, oh, I'm starting at the end of the section. And I mean, that's easy to solve. It's like, don't start at the end of the section, but we want you to move beyond that and start getting to a point where you're taking our advice seriously. You're seriously reading the passage. You're doing the best you possibly can. You're still getting questions wrong, and you dig in and figure out what the precise cause is. And I feel like that's what Chris is doing here. And it also shows an immense amount of self-awareness, right? Which is also required when people review. I feel like so many people are unaware of the fact that when they say an answer choice is a better fit, that they're really just not aware. So they're unaware of the fact that they're not aware of the
Right.
correct explanation for that answer, right?
Right. Last night, I taught two classes back to back. I taught the April 2021 LSAT Flex study group, which is
Yeah.
open to everybody in the world. Anybody can come. Anybody, if you're on our newsletter or anything, you're invited to that study group that I've been doing once a week. And I intend to continue that. The title will update June 2021 LSAT study group. But I love teaching that class. And
Yeah.
then I taught my normal Thursday night class back to back.
Mm-hmm.
And in the study group and in my normal class, I had like 3 or 4 questions in a row where my answer to all of the questions was basically the same. Okay. So what happens is people look at their like metadata and then they ask why they're not improving.
Ugh.
Okay. So
It's very unscientific, right? Like it's very, anyways, go ahead.
well, it's like, I scored 165 on a couple practice tests, but then my last 7 in a row have all been 161s. Why am I not improving? Okay. That's one question. On reading comp, I feel like I'm reading the passages well, but I'm just not getting all of the questions right. What can I do about that? Or
Mm-hmm.
on reading comp, I noticed that I get, or maybe this was an LR question. On LR, I get the harder ones at the end of the section right, but I miss some of the middle difficult. I get the easy ones and the hardest ones, but I miss some of the ones in the middle. You've heard all these questions before, by the way,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. My answer to every single one of those questions was, you missed 4 questions on this section. Okay. You made 8 mistakes
At
to
least.
miss those 4 questions.
Yeah.
I'd never quite articulated it that way before, but it seemed like a pretty powerful way of thinking about it, right? Something
Yeah.
about that multiplication where it's like,
Yeah.
really, you missed 5 of the questions you attempted. Well, guess
You
what?
didn't. Yeah.
That means you made 10 errors. If you missed
And I,
5 questions, at
yeah.
least
Yeah,
that
I
many
sorry, I
errors.
just have to double down on that because like it really is at least, right? Because you're definitely making 2. And who knows what you did in the passage and who knows what you did with the question.
Right. But for every question you've missed,
Yep.
you have neglected to pick the right answer, which is its own mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And you have also picked an incorrect answer.
Yep.
That's 2 mistakes to miss 1 question. So, you might think you did okay, right? You're like, well, yeah, pretty good. I finished the section and I missed 4.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a second. In 35 minutes, you made 8 mistakes, 8
Mm-hmm.
documentable mistakes on the page. You picked 4 wrong answers and you failed to pick 4 correct answers. That's 8 mistakes in 35 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's not lawyer shit. What are you doing? And
Mm-hmm.
so it sounds like Chris has actually figured that out finally,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, this is universal advice that applies to reading comp, logical reasoning, games, everything, every question you're ever going to do on the LSAT.
Mm-hmm.
You have to fuck up twice in order to miss that question. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like people don't want to confront that reality. They're very hesitant, right? They keep asking questions, but they're not asking the right questions because they want to ask these high level, how do I break out of my rut? I keep scoring 162 and I just can't get to 166. And it's like, yeah, because you're not really digging in there and being very specific about the 2 mistakes that you have to make on every single question in order to miss it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, I mean, I know we've talked about this before and I'm, but by analogy, right? You learned your native language not by asking grand generalizations about the language, but you heard specific instances and were corrected on specific instances as you used them incorrectly. And then from that, one day in school, someone told you a rule. And even then, that rule probably didn't make a whole lot of sense. And what you're trying to do when you say, oh, why am I, getting 161? It's just like throwing out some random rule as opposed to actually digging into the specific examples that will help you understand that rule concretely in a way that your brain can actually learn them.
We can use the previous email from Jacob as an example. Uh, Jacob said her reasoning is that less students run out of time when they are able to get the hard questions done first. And as Ben was reading that, he changed less into fewer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, the abstract rule there is that because students are discrete individual students, we have to say
Mm-hmm.
fewer instead of less.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if we taught you that rule in the abstract, you would never understand it.
Yeah.
Instead, we correct it when we see it. And then that's how you learn that grammar. What do you think about Chris's tennis analogy?
I don't know much about tennis. So when he said dump the easy overhead into the net at the end, I'm guessing he could have slammed it, but then he put it
Yeah,
into the net.
right.
Okay.
Like he's standing in the middle of the court, 10 feet from the net, the ball's floating up in the air, and he can just easily put it away. He had to work his ass off to get
To
himself in
get
that
there.
position,
Sure.
right? Because he forced a kind of a bad shot from his opponent, and now he's in the position to just
To
take the
slam it.
point easily, and instead he bricks it, into the net, or
Yeah.
just misses the court entirely, or whatever it is that he does. I
Yeah.
actually like that analogy quite a bit. If you're going to take the time, which you should, to read the passage correctly in reading comprehension, then you got to get paid for that work. And the way you do that is by picking the right answer and dismissing the wrong answers, which the wrong answers, as Chris has noted, are wrong for specific reasons.
Yep.
And you gotta get a little like tough on yourself. It's just not, you can't just let that be okay.
Yep.
Like, how many times, Ben, have you seen students sort of excuse themselves for that, where they're just like, well, I understood it, and I read it. I read the passage really well, but I missed these three questions because on that one there was a word in the answer I chose that I didn't read, and so I picked it, but it was wrong. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, okay, but you also didn't pick the correct answer, which is another
Yeah.
mistake that you should be thinking about.
By the
um,
way, in terms of letting people letting themselves off the hook, I would say there's like sort of I want to say sinister, but it's not sinister. Like deceptive or problematic excuse that sounds good, especially given what we're saying, but is actually another excuse to let yourself off the hook. And we hear it all the time. It's, oh, I should have read that more carefully. Yes, you should have, but can you tell me why now that is incorrect, and why like you said, the wrong answer why the correct answer is correct and why the wrong answer that you chose is incorrect. Like it becomes an excuse to just like move on. Like, oh, if I just read more carefully, I would have gotten it. I'm not so sure that's true.
well, I think it's probably half true. I think you also need to go deeper into that. Like, you got to just really confront that pair of mistakes you've made,
Yes.
right? Like get more specific, spend more time on it. You kind of have to like punish yourself a little bit for this mistake.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, I'm not here for, well, I misread that.
Yeah.
I can't help you. I want to help you. I can't help you if you keep doing that shit. I
Yeah.
just, yeah, I didn't like that one word in the right answer, so I didn't pick that one. And then I just misread the wrong answer I picked.
But
Like,
I can see why it's right now. Oh, can you? Okay, explain to me, why is it better?
that's
And
true.
that's that it still doesn't come out. They're saying it. There's like this weird dialogue that's going on that's like, yes, I get it now. It makes sense. Of course, that's correct. Okay, why? Why?
Right. And that's another thing that came up in class recently, was like, how do I know when I have reviewed a question properly? How do I know when
Mm,
I really understand a question? And I
mhm.
said, and it was funny because it like scared the shit out of the class. I was like, can you imagine yourself explaining that question to me, to my
Yeah.
satisfaction? Like, would
Yep.
I believe you if you explained it to me?
Yeah.
Would I believe you that you actually understand it?
Mm-hmm.
And my teaching style is, I don't think I'm not like really a hard ass in real life, but I am a hard ass about LSAT logic.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because I believe you can understand this shit, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And and when you're doing your review, think about it. Could you explain it to Ben? Ben's
Mm-hmm.
kind of nicer than I am, but he also is going to require you to really he's going to require you to explain it in terms that make sense.
Yeah.
Both of your mistakes. Why is this right answer right, and why didn't you pick it? Why is this wrong answer wrong, and why did you pick it? And, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I misread it is not specific enough.
Nope.
Also, it's your responsibility to just stop doing that shit. There's nothing else we can do to help you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to continue to drop points, because of casual mistakes and just misreading and just misunderstanding and just, well, I wasn't careful enough. uh, I wish you the best, and I really would love to help, but that's the kind of error that there's nothing we can tell you other than stop it. I don't know. Sounds like Chris has learned that lesson, and I would bet, I would bet money that Chris is really going to improve a lot from that position.
He's going to improve a lot, and he's still going to get some questions wrong, but he's going to be at that point where he can then dig into whatever problem that is, fix it, and keep moving on. It's the reason science is so powerful is because you learn, you lock it in, and then you move forward, right? As opposed to this vague, like,
Yeah.
talk.
And you have to practice the way you're going to play on the day of the game, right? So if you keep casually doing this on your practice, well, then you're just training yourself to do that on the official test. When you sit down and do drilling in the LSAT demon, I want you to expect to get every question right.
Yeah. There's no time limit.
Yeah.
Nothing stops the clock except you.
Yeah. And you have to fuck up twice in order to miss that question. If that shit does not turn green when you hit submit, you have made 2 mistakes, and you've got to root those mistakes out. Nobody else can do that for you. It's probably not some LSAT technicality or, some bit of like knowledge that you don't have. 80% of your mistakes have nothing to do with any kind of theory. I picked a random number. It might be 95% of your mistakes have nothing to do with theory. It's that you didn't read that shit carefully enough.
Yeah.
Right? On reading comp, you either didn't read the passage well enough, or you didn't read the question well enough, or you didn't read the right answer well enough, or you didn't read the wrong answer well enough, or some combination of all 4 of those things. Because if you had read the passage, the question, the right answer, and that wrong answer, if you had read those properly with attention to detail and actually understanding what they say, you can't miss the question.
Yeah. And if you don't understand something about logic, well, then you're going to fix that pretty quickly because you understand exactly what was said and you get schooled in that logical idea, and then you're moving on. So yeah,
we're certainly here to help, right?
Yeah.
We've got copious videos and written explanations and the ask button, and the combination of all that should make it perfectly clear. And yeah, you'll take on board whatever little bits of knowledge. There's just not that much knowledge on the LSAT. They're not like, it's not calculus, it's not like you have to learn these principles. It's not chemistry. It's English, and it makes sense. Yeah. And sure, there's a few little things, but it shouldn't take very long for you to encounter those few little things if you're being careful on every question you attempt, and if you're really digging in deep on these mistakes that you keep making. Cool. Yeah, thank you, Chris. If you have an excuse of the week, please email help@thinkinglsat.com or hit us up on social @thinkinglsat. All right, we're gonna go through the mailbag here. Ben?
Yeah, this is from Jake. Jake writes, "Hey, Ben and Nathan, should I write a diversity statement for being a non-traditional 32-year-old student with a blue-collar background?"
We're not going to say non-traditional anymore about 32-year-olds.
Not about 32-year-olds.
That's not non-traditional. Well, I don't even want to say it about 62-year-olds. We've had this argument before.
Yeah, there's some cutoff for me, but I'm willing to grant you 32 for sure. For sure, we're at least on the same page there.
It's vague anyway, so you could just say it for what it is. You're a bit older, but 32 years old isn't even older. Yeah,
no, I wouldn't consider that even old. Yeah, I mean, old. Technically it's older than the average, but it's not.
What, by 5 years or something? Like it's inconsequential. You guys trust me. When you get to our age, when you get to Ben's age and my age, you're gonna realize that like 20s, 30s, 40s, it's all kind of the same. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing in life until quite a bit later.
No,
if
I don't
ever.
think they know when they're leaving. I don't know how many. You're just living until you die. Sorry. Anyways,
Yes.
it's your best guess. It's worth shooting
So
for.
should Jake write a diversity statement? I provisionally, probably, yeah. I mean, but the blue collar background to me is a lot more interesting than the 32 years old.
Sure. Yeah. As a young student, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and ADHD.
Mm.
My symptoms caused me to drop out and I started selling cars. When I got married, my wife realized I would stop breathing while sleeping and that I would do bizarre things and not remember them in the morning. Uh, I don't I don't see much of a place for any of this in your
Absolutely not. I would
application.
leave all that out. I immediately, if I'm a law school admissions person, I immediately start thinking you probably got extra time on the LSAT, which I don't want to know that. If you did, that's fine, but I do not want to know that.
Yeah.
And I just worry that you're a problem. I mean, it's like, this is, how many excuses is this?
And they're not going to
Not that
come out and say that because they can't say that on some
no,
level,
but
right? But they're,
it's just drama that I don't want. I got a
yeah,
stack of applications of people who do not have bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and ADHD
or sleep apnea and
or
these
sleep
other things.
apnea. I don't, do not disclose all of these things, which, you know what? I might not legally be allowed to discriminate against you because of ADHD, but I don't have to give you a reason when I don't admit you.
Yeah. And
So,
and it's possible that the person who's not admitting you may not even admit to themselves
right.
because of the legal ramifications and the moral or whatever ramifications are so like have beaten back their mind so much that they can't even admit to themselves that that's why they're denying you, but they're still afraid on some level. And so then they don't. And there's plenty of other reasons to deny people that you don't have to, you can point to anything you want and it becomes rational and it's over.
Yeah. Stop disclosing these things. It's not I don't care. I would rather, I mean, you dropped out and started selling cars. That's awesome. I'd love to hear about you selling cars.
Yep.
I don't care
Just
why
started.
you're there. Why are you protesting so much? Why are you ashamed of selling cars?
Well, I think it's a common problem that other people have, even without as many challenges that Jake has faced. They just, I don't know, they feel like they're going to tell this story, and the person on the other side is going to feel sympathy or empathy for them, and then somehow start rooting for them, like saying, "Okay, well, look at what you've overcome. I want you on my team." It doesn't work that way. They want the strongest players, and this does not make you look strong, regardless of whether it is true or not.
Sydney Montgomery, our guest on episode 290 of the
Yeah.
podcast, refers to this as an exercise in trauma Olympics.
Mm.
And that's what we want to avoid on our personal statement and on our diversity statement. I'm not saying that you can't acknowledge some of this, but you're supposed to be putting your best foot forward. And you're definitely not putting your best foot forward if you're giving me a whole litany of various problems.
Let me keep reading this. He says some more. So it says it turns out I have sleep apnea and REM movement disorder or REM movement disorder. My brain was chronically deprived of oxygen and my sleep stages were fragmented. Okay, sorry to hear that. When I was treated, all of my symptoms improved and it became apparent that I wasn't bipolar, depressed, etc. So,
So
okay,
it's not
these
even,
problems are gone.
well,
Yeah.
it's not even a real diagnosis.
Yeah.
But my like subconscious brain still is gonna, I don't want to discriminate against you, but I don't know that I'm actually capable of rationally choosing that path. You brought up bipolar and depression.
Well, and
I'm
even if you
always going to
are,
link
it's
you
a
to
waste
that.
of time, right? It's a waste of time because you don't have that many sentences. My lights are flashing for some odd reason. You don't have that many sentences in your personal statement. Don't be spending any of them on this.
It's too many excuses. It's too many negative things about you. They're not even real. If you want to write an addendum, I think an addendum is appropriate here. The diversity statement, I mean, if you want to write about selling cars, or even in your personal statement, if you want to write about selling cars, I think you can put your best foot forward there. And I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah.
But a diversity statement that includes shit that wasn't even real, like bipolar and depression, you know, even if I am perfectly neutral, non-biased, even if I'm capable of knowing that you do have bipolar and depression and not judging you for that, as Ben said, it's still a waste of time. It's certainly not a point in your favor, right? I'm not like, hey, Ben, look at this guy. He was diagnosed with bipolar and depression and anxiety and ADHD.
Yep.
Let's admit them. That's not how it's gonna go down ever. You can certainly say, I think a possible an addendum here to explain just kind of your story, right? Like you dropped out of college and didn't go back until later in life. Had a 1 point. Well, the email continues. It's kind of temporally, the story's out of order here, but it was a 1.83 GPA and then a drop out of college. Okay. I do think that that's the kind of thing that needs to be explained via an addendum, not a diversity statement, but an addendum. And you can definitely explain that you weren't diagnosed. I just don't even bring up the bipolar, depression, anxiety, or ADHD. Just say that this is a medical issue that you weren't diagnosed with until 5 years after you had dropped out of college, or whatever it is.
Yeah, you were diagnosed, you were treated, and then bam, it went up to a 3.95. They're not going to care what it was. They're going to say, okay, problem solved. Great.
And that's your story. Leave all this other shit out of it. Don't muddy the waters with a whole bunch of distractions and things that really can't possibly be a point in your favor. Instead, just talk about, well, I got to acknowledge the fact that I got a 1.83 for my first 2 years of college and then dropped out. But what was happening was, and I didn't notice until my wife noticed, that I would stop breathing while sleeping and that I would do bizarre things and not remember them in the morning. I went to the doctor. I got treated for sleep apnea. My REM movement disorder was corrected. And then bang, 3.95 for the last 5 semesters of college, and got promoted at my job and all that stuff, all that good stuff. Right. So we use one excuse, sleep apnea, and we go straight to the winning part.
Well, I don't know if I would even mention the sleep apnea. I would just say an undiagnosed condition that was treated when I was out of college, maybe.
That's fine. I think we can probably go either way, and it depends on how it's actually executed in the statement, or
it's going to depend a lot on that. But I'm just worried about someone looking at sleep apnea and saying, "What? That's why you have a 1.83?" Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
I kind of like it for that same reason. If you just say I had an undiagnosed medical condition, then I don't know. I might start to worry that it's something. Sleep apnea to me is like, I understand how important sleep is. And if you were never sleeping well for your entire life, I can see how that would cause lots of different cascading, problems in your life.
Sure. So talk about sleep apnea and maybe oxygen deprivation, right?
Exactly.
To emphasize that point. Yep.
But you saying specifically that you had been diagnosed with all these other scary things, not that they're that scary, but I mean, they can be like devastating, and you don't actually have any of those things. Or if you did, they were only a symptom of the sleep apnea. So we can just talk about the sleep apnea. That's solved now. And the school goes, oh, so I'm getting the guy who got a 3.95 for his last 5 semesters, not the guy who got a 1.83 and dropped out and came back 5 years later.
Yeah. So just to wrap this up for Jake, because he does have some good news here. I've been listening to the podcast for 10 months and used the demon to go from a 156 to a 171 on my second attempt on the February flex. Nice work, man. My resume sucks, and my main accomplishments as an adult have been a good have been being a good salesman and improving the internet sales numbers at the Subaru dealership I worked for. Can I spin this background into a diversity statement? One thing I would like, you have to grapple with your weaknesses, but I don't know if I would say that your resume sucks. I
I
feel
would
like you're selling
absolutely
yourself
not
short.
say that.
Yeah.
You're an adult who's been working in the real world, who has real world accomplishments at your job. You don't think there's any connection between like lawyering and sales, or lawyering and improving sales numbers at your dealership? Lawyering is business. Most
Yeah.
lawyers who get paid are in business. You've been in business. Every single one of those cars you sold came with like a fucking 50-page legal contract.
Yep.
I'm
A
not that you like
warranty.
had anything to do with like that part, but I mean, you sat there with that person while they signed their name 40 times. And like, I, yeah, I really don't like, I would write my personal statement about car sales if I was
Mm-hmm.
Jake. I
Yep.
would be proud to talk about my accomplishments in car sales. In an addendum, I would talk about how, yeah, I got here by this, you know, different road for sure.
Yep.
But, you know, you should, in your personal statement, you have to be proud of your achievements. And I think I think you're just thinking about this totally wrong. If you don't think that kicking ass at a car dealership, if you don't think that that's makes for a feather in your cap, you're totally wrong about that.
Yeah. And the 171 is going to help a lot. So you talk confidently about your experience, and you present a 171, and your GPA is not going to be a 3.95, obviously because of averaging, but you point out in an addendum that you had a 3.95 at the end. You're going to come across as a strong candidate.
You're competing against 21-year-olds with no real world experience. The person reading your personal statement is an adult who understands what the real world is like, and who, like, come on, I would much rather have somebody who worked in a car dealership for 10 years and kicked ass there than somebody who studied political science and they're coming straight out of college. Like, the person who has the I mean, you've got your feet on planet Earth, Jake, and I think that can make a kick-ass lawyer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for writing in.
Yeah, thanks, Jake.
and good luck. I think you're going to do quite well. So,
oh, I think that could make for an excellent applicant. 171, it's a diamond in the rough because your overall GPA is going to be shit. But the 171 is going to catch my eye. And when I see your addendum that explains your grades, I'm going to go, oh shit, clear break from the person you used to be, treated for a medical condition, 3.95 after that.
yep.
Combined with the 171, and hey, real world experience, like succeeded in increasing sales numbers at this dealership. Love all that.
Yep.
Like, you look like a hustler.
You're going to be an undervalued stock, right?
Yeah, which a savvy school is going to snap up.
Yep. They're going to say, wait a sec. We dug in and we see you're valuable, and we are going to want to snatch you away before someone else makes the same realization.
If I'm Golden Gate or Southwestern or whatever, like, regional law school, that's a full ride. I don't care how shitty your grades are. 171 and success in the real world, you look like a hustler to me who's got the smarts to kick ass and raise the prestige of my school. All right.
Cool.
Good afternoon, Ben and Nathan. I'm an LSAT Demon subscriber and a fan of the Thinking LSAT podcast. I wanted to thank you both. Your advice, score improvements. Oh, I applied to law school this admission cycle and have recently accepted a full tuition scholarship to attend Penn State Law, University Park.
Yes.
Thank you. A very grateful LSAT Demon subscriber. And this anonymous subscriber provides the following information. Studied for the LSAT for a total of 6 months. 4 of that was using the Demon. LSAT diagnostic score was 146. Average practice score, the month of the official LSAT, was 167. Official October LSAT was 164. So a few points below practice average, but almost 20 points above the diagnostic score. Undergraduate GPA is not that great, 3.07. So 3.07 out of 164 with a full ride to a regional law school. It's like could have worked out even better.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I was like, grateful. I'm glad you're going for free because at least you're not breaking that rule. But with a 167 average, that means what? Maybe you hit even 170. I don't know, but something higher.
You can't average 167 without like sometimes hitting 170. It's really hard to have that narrow of a range.
Yeah. So, and then you got a 164 in October. I'm guessing that in an effort to apply this cycle, you threw in the towel when you could have kept fighting.
But we don't know the background here. This school could be right next door to their house that they own. They could have 3 kids. They could be, this could be the best school for them. And they did get a full ride. So hey, they're not paying for law school.
Wait, is this Nathan?
Come on, Ben. I'm so grateful when anybody
you have a little good cop badge right
listens
here.
to like... any of our advice. Listen, the big picture here, that box is checked, right? Yeah. This person is not paying for law school.
Yeah, I agree. They could be getting a stipend, but whatever. Yeah, let's keep going.
No, that's excellent. That's very good news. Hey, send us your favorite moments from the show. You can help us grow on social media if you send us timestamps from a funny or helpful tip from the latest episode. You can also just ask us any question at any time. Help at thinkinglsat.com or on social at thinkinglsat. You want to take this next one?
Yeah, sure. Hi guys! Exclamation point. I just started listening to your podcast and love it so far. I'm beginning my sophomore year of undergrad. Wow. Maisie? Macy? Maisie. Okay. Maisie, you're listening to our podcast and you're only a sophomore. That's great to hear. And I wanted your advice for what I should be doing now. I'm dead set on law school. Oh, okay. And I've gotten some advice from lawyers and my pre-law advisor for what to do this early. But I wanted to hear from you guys. I feel that it's still way too early to start the Demon, which I'll definitely be doing, and want to know what free resources, activities, or brain training that you'd recommend. I know that it may be pretty early to be asking about LSAT studying, but I specifically want to know what I can do now to build LSAT skills and intuition in ways outside a study program. Okay. I don't know. If Maisie wants to build LSAT skills, I think the most effective way to do that is to study for the LSAT. And there's an upside here. If you're actually serious about this and you study now and you take the test in 6 months or whatever, your score is good for 5 years. And if you absolutely hate the process, then that might help you question your determination to go to law school before you're that far into your undergrad career. So you still have time to explore other options.
Yeah. If I was your, brother, I would say, or your dad or something, I would say, hey, you're too young to be dead set on law school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not sure. Like, what justification do you have for that? Have you ever been in a law office? Do you know what lawyers actually, maybe you do. And if you do, great. But my presumption is there's probably other options out there that you haven't yet explored. You also probably don't know enough about legal practice to really be just 100% dead set on law school. So I would encourage you to explore all of your other avenues and only go down the LSAT route when you become like, I have a burning desire to practice law and I'm never going to be happy in life if I don't practice law. Those are the people that should be going down this road. If you have any doubt at all, this is not right for you. And if you're 20 years old, I just don't know that you, I don't know that you can possibly be that dead set.
Yeah. Well, and here's another concern is if you're dead set now and you start taking these classes, which I feel like are kind of phony classes. I don't really know how to describe them. They're like these like pre-law oriented classes,
Uh,
as opposed to taking like classes outside of your comfort zone. You know, you can take electives, consider taking something in a totally far off field, maybe physics, and see how it goes. I mean, you may find yourself enamored by it in a way that would get you to change
yeah.
your
I,
trajectory.
I do have one caveat there, which is if you really are locked into the law school path,
Yeah.
you probably shouldn't take physics because it's going to fuck up your GPA. I'm
Well,
sorry,
wait a
but
sec.
I mean, no,
Actually,
it's,
so the people who do the best on the LSAT are physics majors, right? Econ
yeah,
majors and math majors.
but it's also really, really hard to get A's in those classes. And that's not the case for history,
All right. So maybe not
English,
physics,
poli
but
sci.
ah, I don't know. I would say the value in knowing whether or not you want to pursue a career or
Yeah.
life in physics is more valuable
Yeah.
than the scorecard.
That's true. That's true. I mean, there's other ways you can explore that besides like taking
Sure.
undergraduate classes that are going to end up on your GPA. You know, the
Yeah.
LSAC, the system is so fucked up, right? Like I just got an email yesterday from a student who had 2 years worth of ungraded work, like went to
Mm-hmm.
some hippie school that just gave written evaluations, which
Yeah.
is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure it was actually a super excellent school, but they don't have any way of numerically judging. And then he had 56 credits worth of a 3.95 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And LSAC is not going to report a GPA for him because you
Ooh.
have to have 60 credits.
Ooh.
And so he's going to just have a no GPA, which
Mm.
is fine. The school's going to report you as no GPA. So they
Yeah.
don't, I think they kind of don't care. But the bummer is that 3.95 doesn't get to count in his favor, which it
Mm-hmm.
clearly would have if he would have just gotten one more graded class in undergrad.
Hmm. Yeah.
So there is, if you are really 1,000% sure, there's some gaming of the system, which is probably in your favor to
Mm-hmm.
just make sure that you're going to have a really good reportable GPA.
What about LSAT?
Well, and then LSAT is, of course, it's the most important thing you can do, right? Or it's at least equally important for the top 14.
Sure.
Yeah. So in that case, the guy who doesn't have a GPA, of course, LSAT is going to carry more weight. And as long as he's above the 75th percentile, I think the school is going to be like, you're in. But boy, if he had that 3.95 to go along with his 170, whatever, then
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about all of the top most elite schools. I want to give Maisie a couple other little bits of advice.
Okay.
To actually answer your question, I specifically want to know what I can do now besides the LSAT to build LSAT skills and intuition. The only thing I would ever recommend is just read books. Don't really care what you read books. One more thing, maybe take a couple classes in like economics.
Sure. Those are also hard though. All right. They're going to fall into that category
Basic
of,
economics pretty easy, isn't it? I found micro and macro to be like really for like take the econ classes for business majors. You'll learn plenty. Like take business classes. Business classes are easy. I was a business major.
oh yeah, I agree. They're easy. I just wonder if they then lose their value, but,
I
yeah,
think you still learn quite a bit of practical stuff that a lot of times when we see 21-year-olds, like they don't know what profit is,
sure. Yeah.
um, but
I mean, I
the
would
last,
love for someone to take an econ class. I'm just saying that
yeah,
I think that they're generally perceived as more
well,
challenging, even
don't
even
take the
one-on-one.
super hard one that requires you to do differential equations or whatever. Like take
Yeah.
the easy one. take the econ for dummies class. That could be, I think, super helpful. I think that could be just as helpful as the one that requires calculus. I mean, there's you're going to get the general gist of things, which the LSAT, when they start talking about economics, it's not on a very sophisticated level, right? It's very, very basic.
No.
The other thing I would say, Maisie, and this is probably the opposite of what you're hearing from your pre-law advisor, it is not too early to start prepping for the LSAT. I don't think it's too early at all. If you're going to go straight through from undergrad to law school, the K through JD, as they call it, if you really are going to go straight through, if you 100% have made up your mind and you're going to go to law school, I don't see any reason not to prep for the LSAT right now. You can get it done while you're, maybe your summer breaks or whatever. You'll have multiple chances. You'll have all the time in the world to prep, multiple chances at the official LSAT. Your score is good for 5 years once you take it.
Yeah. And you won't be in the situation that Grateful was in, taking the test in October and trying to decide whether that's your last time to take it or not, because you can take it whenever.
Thanks, Maisie.
Thank you.
Got time for one more?
Yeah. Let's see here. I could do
I'll read
one
it
more.
fast.
Okay.
Howdy, A. Ben and Nathan. In short, when is it okay to pay for law school? I had full freight paid for on merit-based awards for both undergrad and graduate school. I've always had an innate aversion to paying for schooling and hope to continue the streak. What are the edge cases where you would say that it is allowable to bet on yourself via paying for part of the cost yourself? Would you consider doing so for no schools whatsoever, for Yale, Stanford, and Harvard only, or would it expand beyond those three? For context, I'm new to studying for the LSAT. My cold practice test was a 169. Most of my difficulty on the practice tests comes in the games, which, as you note, are the most learnable. Thanks for the podcast and praise the demon. C. P.S. This is a question for you, Ben. When the questions in the demon become harder, are all question types represented roughly equally in each difficulty level? I was curious if certain question types show up less regularly in certain regions, since question type may be correlated with difficulty. I would like to avoid creating any blind spots in my prep. My gut is that's nothing you need to worry about. But what do you think?
You don't need to worry about it, but I will answer the technical question. If you look at conclusion questions, for example, there are tons of conclusion questions. That's just asking for the main point of the argument, levels 1 and 2. There's a handful at level 3, and I think there's like one level 4 and probably 1 or 2 level 5 conclusion questions. They're just not that.
They're just not that hard
To make
on
hard,
average.
right? Like it's not easy to make them difficult. And so you're not going to have a blind spot, because if you can identify the conclusion in some of these harder level 5 questions, sometimes that's what makes them hard, even though it's not a conclusion question. So
the LSAT is gonna show you what your problems are. If you drill in the demon's automatically going to keep track of what you need to work on, and it's going to just give you those questions. You don't have to think about anything. You just hit drill and work on the question. That's it. When you do timed sections, I mean, the 2 you're missing per section, well, those are the ones that you need to give some attention to. Yeah. I don't care what their difficulty level is. I don't care what their question type is. I care why you missed that one question. And I think that's all you really need to worry about. Let's address the first question. When is it okay to pay for law school? We had Sydney Montgomery on the last episode of the show. She turned down UVA to go to Harvard. She turned down a full ride at UVA to go to Harvard. But in her case, I think it actually does qualify. One, because it's Harvard, which does open doors, that nowhere else possibly, or Stanford or Yale would open.
Yeah, this is the exponential increase in value at the very top. Right?
At the very, very, very top. Right.
Yes.
Where, presidents of the United States come from.
Sure.
And so an exception can be made there.
Mm-hmm.
Another reason why an exception can be made is because those schools do need-based scholarships, not merit-based scholarships. So she did not get the merit-based scholarship from Harvard, but she got need-based help, and she knew she was going to be in their extremely robust LRAP program.
Yeah.
And so like she had the finances like calculated in advance where it actually made sense for her. If you're literally deciding between paying for Harvard or getting a full ride to UVA, for one, you can't go wrong anyway.
Nope. Can't.
For two, there might be reasons why you would choose the truly elite school.
Yeah.
The problem is people then extrapolate this to non-analogous choices, right? Well, what if I got admitted to Berkeley, but I got a full ride to Golden Gate. Like, what should I do then?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, wait a second. That's not the choice that you're actually making if you've applied correctly.
Yeah. Well, I would say this. I would say our presumption is always, one, don't go to law school. If you decide to go, two,
We don't say that very often, but it is pretty true, right? Like when Maisie was like, I'm dead set on law school, both of us are kind of like, oh, really? Oh man, I'm sorry. Okay, well, all right. If we'll beyond that, let's see how we can help you. But you could have avoided this whole miserable life by making a different choice. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so here's the hierarchy, right? So number one is don't go.
Yes.
If you are going to go for some godforsaken reason,
Ugh.
don't pay, right?
Ugh,
And
for sure.
if you are going to pay, then you need pay as little as possible, and the price that you pay, not the amount you get off, right? Everybody focuses on the scholarship amount. It's like, I don't care about that. I want to know how much you're going to pay.
Right.
How much are you going to pay to go, and get that number very clear in your head, and make sure that you're using that money to buy something that is equal to or greater in value. So in your example, I mean, you were talking about extreme example. You're saying going from UVA to Harvard, right? She is paying a lot of money to do that, but at the same time, maybe not so much because she's going to get paid back, and she's going to Harvard. And so you're saying the increase in value is greater than the cost. That's always the case. This is economics, right? This is basic economics. So I'm sure there are exceptions. I don't even know what they are. But if you came to me with two very similar schools, and one was going to cost 10 grand and the other was going to be free, which is not entirely accurate because you also have to pay for the cost of living and all that other stuff. But if you said there was a $10,000 difference, I would say, okay, what are you getting for that 10 grand? And can you make the case that it's worth it? If you can, your family is nearby, it's in a city you want to practice in. I don't know. Then maybe yes, but the presumption is no.
The presumption is no, because the vast majority of these decisions are actually choosing between UC Hastings and University of San Francisco, which are 2 miles away from each other, which are both just regional law schools. It's not worth distinguishing between the two as far as the rankings are concerned. They're in the same geographical area. They're the same rough quality of schools. And in that case, you might be facing a full ride offer from USF and no offer or a real small offer from Hastings. And when you're asking that question, is it worth $30,000 a year more to go to Hastings? My answer is absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No way you can show me the math that makes that work out. It's just not going to be not possible.
Yep. And the metric that most people use is they look at the rankings, right? And so they say, hey, well, this school is 43rd, which is not true because just last year was probably 37th. But this one is 43 and the other one I'm looking at is 50. It's like, I'm sorry, there is actually no dollar value between those two numbers. There's zero. So you can't tell me that paying 10 grand or 30 grand, something way worse, for something that is worth absolutely nothing makes any sense.
US News sucks. They have done the world a giant disservice by ranking the law schools all the way down to 100 or 150 or whatever. There's no difference between like 25 and 35, let alone a difference between 75 and 85. Who gives a shit? You're not going to the best law school in the country.
Yep.
You're not playing
For
for
the
the
world.
Yankees. So it doesn't matter. It's a regional law school, which is fine. It's going to do all kinds of fine things for you. But like shitting on these lower ranked schools just because US News happens to have them lower ranked is just a real bad. That's a very dumb strategy. My last advice for C is you also shouldn't be thinking about this right now. You should be working on the best LSAT you can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank
You
you.
should be applying early. You should be applying broadly. And once your actual offers are in hand, then we would love to talk about this decision you're going to make. But we can't make this decision in the abstract. There's no hard and fast rule. I'm not going to say, well, of course you can make an exception for Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, but nowhere else. That's not going to be my advice. We have to look at the actual offers in hand.
It's like, put this in a dating contest or context, right? Like, it's like, oh, what if I meet two people? One is more attractive and the other one's nicer, but I mean, how much more? Like, it's like, give me the two people and then we can talk about it, right? Like, right now, there's just no.
Let's get out there. Let's do some dating. Let's
actually have two people that are interested in you. You may never get there.
Right. It's theoretical deciding what you're going to do 5 years before it actually happens. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate C's question. I'm glad you wrote into the show, but it is, we're statsterbating and we need another word for absterbating.
Yeah. Absterbating. Yeah. Or something about schools. Yeah. Or scholarship. Right. So it's not just your application. It's the acceptances that you've received, your offers, your offsterbating.
Before they're ever even in hand.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Hey, you can be LSAT famous. All you got to do is email help@thinkinglsat.com and you can get on the agenda for a future show. If you have any questions about the LSAT demon, which we believe is the by far best way to prepare for the LSAT, we're biased, but we're not wrong. You can email help@lsatdemon.com to learn more about, really, it's bitching. It's awesome. I love being part of it. I love teaching my classes. I'm super proud of the community we've built. I mean, it's just, it's excellent. If you've listened to the show this far, I think you have one choice for your LSAT prep, which is the demon. Please, you'll enjoy it. Okay.
And our new tagline is biased but true.
Yeah, absolutely. That was episode 291 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. Thanks all y'all for listening. Nice knowing you. Don't pay for law school.